Greetings. In this video we are going to talk about how to get started with coding and programming in HTML in Chapter 2 for this course. First things first, inside of your Canvas course, under the second module, there's something in there referred to as Notepad++ download. If you're working on a PC or Windows-based machine, I encourage you to download Notepad++. If you're working on a Mac, Notepad++ is not available. However, a simple search underneath your app tools will allow you to find that there are many different developer tools in which you can install. I currently have a tool called BB Edit installed. It's free and it's a great tool or application for us to use for our coding of our HTML and CSS in this semester. So complete that process before getting started. Once you've done that, the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to actually have over here on the right hand side of the screen my PowerPoint for the chapter. I encourage you to not only have the PowerPoint open and follow along with your text editor, as well as a web page. So you'll see I've got the situation set up where I've got two windows going, the left side being the coding side and the right side is where we will see our different edits to the actual browser. This chapter is going to go through HTML basics. You'll notice in the lower right corner I've got the PowerPoint available for you to follow along with the chapter in your textbook. Some of the things that we're going to talk about in this chapter are the differences between older versions of HTML and the newer version of HTML5. And then the key thing about the chapter is that we're going to get into some of the required HTML tags and the semantics of how these tags are best used inside of your web pages. So what is HTML? Basically, HTML is a set of markup symbols and codes that are intended for displaying a web browser page, as you just read right here. Well, what does that mean? It basically is a set of brackets that we put specific code into, or specific tag names or elements into these brackets that the browser knows what to do. Well, how does the browser know what to do with it? Well, the World Wide Web Consortium basically sets the standards for HTML, and the browser utilizes something referred to as a document type definition. So as you see right here is the left and right bracket that always opens and closes whatever the HTML element is going to be inside of it. There's always an opening tag and a closing tag for the majority of all HTML tags. We're going to go through what these look like in just a moment here. Newest versions of HTML5 basically allow us to have far more functionality than we had in the past. As the years have gone on and we've gone from Web 1.0 to Web 2.0, we like for websites to have interactivity and engagement with our viewers or our customers or our clients are actually on our website. So newest versions of HTML5 allow us to have interaction with our forms and the data. We can also display native video and audio, meaning that different MIME types are recognized differently by computers and smartphones and different devices, and so we're able to utilize the different tools on these different platforms more efficiently than in the past. So the document type definition, what is this? Well, basically this is the set of elements, the HTML tags that we are permitted to use. Now ideally, all browsers utilize that same DTD and display the information exactly the same. Well, in theory, this would allow all viewers of any website to go from Internet Explorer to Microsoft Edge to Chrome to Safari to Opera to whatever the actual browser is and having a seamless display of the exact same website. You and I both know that that's not the case because sometimes you'll load up a page in Chrome and it will look very different or slightly different in different browsers like Edge or Internet Explorer. Back in the day, there used to be a tool called Netscape Navigator, and so that too differed just enough from Internet Explorer that users were not getting the exact same experience. From that experiences back when Internet Explorer and Netscape Navigator were trying to compete for their largest audience of people to use their browsers, we did find that each of those different companies added their own tags to the DTD. So for example, in one of the browsers there was a marquee element, HTML element, that would basically allow information to run across the screen from left to right, much like you would see on the marquee of a banner or something outside. That being said, the other browser utilized a tool or an element called the blink, and so it would start blinking stuff on your actual web page. Well, if the developer utilized either the blink or the marquee with their intended audience using whatever browser they use to develop the website, they wouldn't get that same experience if they used a different browser. So that in itself became a large problem, and so browsers are now forced to adhere to the HTML5 or whatever the version is based on the document type definition created by the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium. So here's some examples of how the browser knows which version you're using for HTML. So in this example right here where we say XHTML 1.0, there was only one version of XHTML and it didn't last too long. But you'll see that there's, right here where it says transitional, there was actually a different DTD if a user was going to use frames on their website or if they want to be strict in their development. I won't go into a ton of detail about what these differences were. This transitional allowed users to use older versions of HTML, such as HTML 4.0, and the newer versions of what was expected out of XHTML 1.0. So it left a little more room for lenience between the browsers. In the strict DTD, there was no utilizing elements or HTML tags that were from prior versions of HTML, and you had to be exactly correct in how you coded your code in the XHTML 1.0 strict, meaning that all of your HTML tags were lowercase, all HTML tags opened and closed, things of that nature. So it was just far more strict. From that, though, we learned that this DTD, we had to put this at the top of all of our web pages, was too long, and simple little errors like where you see my mouse pointing, it actually says XHTML1. Well, that's really hard to see. So one little error in terms of a typo would throw off how the browser actually recognized which DTD it was supposed to be using, and so we had greater issues with websites displaying properly because really the browser didn't know which version of HTML it was supposed to be using. So from there we learned a lesson, and now we have an actual doc type that looks just like this. This is what we're going to have at the top of all of our HTML pages. So you see it starts with a left bracket and then an exclamation point, and then in this case doc type is in capitalized letters, and then in lowercase letters is HTML and the closing bracket. So at this time, if you have your editor open, again, I have a tool called BBEdit open on my Mac, but if you have Notepad++ open on your computer, let's click on that window really quick and type in our very first line of code, and it's going to be our DTD, or data type definition. So it's going to be less than, sign, exclamation point, doc type, and then a space, and then lowercase HTML, and then the right bracket on the right hand side. So this is the very first line of code. You don't want to put anything above it, and again it has to be spaced and spelled with uppercase and lowercase exactly as you see it there. Alright, I'm going to come back to my PowerPoint as we continue on. So this basically what we're looking at is an example of our very first HTML5 web page. So you'll see again it has that doc type listed there. Then it says HTML lang equals EN. EN is referring to the English language. Basically that's what we're utilizing on our browser, is a keyboard that is known by the English language. Obviously keyboards differ because letters differ, alphabets differ in different languages. So if you were in a different country, or you were coding utilizing different syntax or language, you would change it from an EN to whatever that native language is using the appropriate abbreviation. So if you're like doing something in German, maybe you would have DU for Deutsch, or if you're doing something in Spanish, it would be ES for Espanol. So that language attribute value will change based on what language or syntax you are using. When it comes to what you're seeing right here where it says HTML, that is the actual tag. So in short, whenever, I'm going to come back over to my text editor now, whenever we want to type in a tag, it's going to be HTML. Okay, now that's the way a tag gets displayed. However, in this particular example we're looking at, we have something called an attribute, and an attribute always equals a value. That value is always inside of quotation marks, and there's never a space between the attribute, the equal sign, and the value. So I'm going to come back over to my editor and put a space after the word HTML, type in lang equals quote en quote, and then that's how that looks. You're going to see that I've got some color coding happening here because this is what my text editor is doing to identify different elements and HTML tags. So let's get you to save your file at this time, and you'll also see that once you identify within your text editor that you're working on an HTML file in comparison to a text file or a cascading style sheet file or a C programming file, whatever language you're writing it in, you're going to see the different colors associated with the tags that are there. So if you are utilizing Notepad++, let me give you a piece of information / warning. So when you go to File and choose Save Your File, okay, when your Notepad+ opens up, give it a name. You can see right here I've called this one Index. We'll talk more about file naming conventions, but typically the home page of any website you create is always called Index, or in some cases it could be default. So actually let me change this to default so that way you can see what this looks like. It also says .html because I already typed that in. And then I already chose the location which I'm going to store this, which is in my Chapter 2 folder. For those of you who are utilizing Notepad++, I apologize, but I don't have it on a Mac, so I have to have you envision what I'm talking about. At the bottom of your page, it's going to ask you what your Save As file type is. So make sure you click on the drop-down list for Save As file type and locate HTML, okay, Hypertext Markup Language. Choose that. Then give yourself the file name. At this point, you should not have to type in anything. You simply can press the Save key. If for some reason you typed in or you selected HTML, but your file name is called default.txt.html, or if it's called default.html.txt, we need you to remove that .txt. It cannot have any reference to it being a text file. It has to be an HTML file. So again, in Notepad++, it's a little clumsy. Maybe the newest versions are updated since last year. But again, give yourself a file name. Make sure you choose from the drop-down list that you're doing an HTML page. And then at the top, if you need to, ensure that it says whatever your file name is, .html. All right, and then again, when it comes to saving locations, try to create yourself a nice little folder structure as to where you're going to save your files on a weekly basis. So that way they're not arbitrarily just sitting in your My Documents. You can see right here, I've got my Documents folder. Inside my Documents folder is where I'm creating my videos, and inside here I've got the Chapter 2. And so inside there is where I'm going to put my index.html, or in this case, the default, and choose Save. So now my file name has been updated to default.html, and again the color coding should be there. Again, if you are Notepad++ and the color coding does not change, I have to think that maybe you're working with a TXT file instead of an HTML file. So pause the video and get yourself squared away to make sure you're saving as an HTML file. Alright, so I'm going to continue on a few more and then we'll take a break from this video. Other things that you see inside of this PowerPoint is that we go from the language, which this language is not necessarily required, the HTML tag is. So if you choose to not put this inside of your HTML tag, it's okay. You still need to have that HTML file or that HTML element tag right there. Okay. The next thing we're going to do is inside of our editor, we're also going to add in what's called the head. Now the head is going to be up in the head section at the top of the document, and whatever you put inside the head section is going to be non-visible to the users or the viewers on your browser. Okay, so you can see right here we've got something called the page title goes here. The page title is what you're going to see actually on your tabs of your browser. So let's press head, and then I'm going to actually utilize a new technique to show you, which is called tabbing, which is when you press your tab key to move over, or you can press your space bar 2 to 3 times. Indenting your code is going to be really beneficial to you when you're debugging why a page is working or why it stops working or what isn't working about your page. And a lot of times it's because we forget to close an HTML tag, and that's not okay. Okay, so inside here I'm going to type in title and then use my arrow key to move over, and I'll say this is my first web page. And then I'm going to type in that left bracket, so that's the less than sign, a forward slash, and then type in the word, oops, title. I wish my classroom was in front of me to tell me when I have spelling errors, so hopefully I don't get too far along with spelling errors without somebody talking to the monitor saying, hey, Mrs. Sullivan, wrong spelling. All right, so anyway, that's going to be the title. Now, with every tag that we've opened, we have to close. This is what a closing tag looks like, just like the opening tag, except it has a forward slash, okay? And now we're going to press the Enter key at the end of this line, and that's all I'm going to actually put inside of my head section. So I'm going to press the back arrow key and then close off the head, okay? So you can see I've tabbed over because the title is a child to the head tag, and then this head tag gets, the closing head tag gets moved back over. All right, so over here in the PowerPoint, I did skip over this tag. We should probably go back and add it. It's called a meta char set. And again, this is very specific to the actual ASCII characters in the character set that we're going to be using. So let's go back and add in a meta tag. So it's meta, and then that technically is the tag. However, this meta means nothing. In the case of HTML, the only thing that you can use a meta for is whatever you specify in the attributes. So in this case, the attribute is going to be char set equals quotation mark, lowercase UTF dash, or the minus sign 8. And then you close your quotation marks and close your tag. All right, so this again is what we call an attribute equals value. Values are always in quotes. Now uniquely, the meta, as you can see, does not have a closing tag. So at the beginning of this lecture I'd mentioned the majority of all tags always will have a closing tag. And this is one of the very few instances where the meta doesn't have a closing tag. We simply have stated the char set as UTF-8, bada bing, bada boom, we're done. There's nothing more to say about it, so therefore there's no closing meta tag. All right, so moving on, you can see that there's now the body tag, and then the text goes inside of there, and then the body tag closes, and then the HTML. So I'm going to take a brief pause right here, stop the video, and jump back in case anybody needs to take a break. We'll jump in the next video.